everybody. Welcome back. We met together like this at fourth quarter. It was probably the end of November, early December. So I just want to take a moment to welcome everybody back and acknowledge that we all have a lot going on in our days, going from Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting and maybe tending to children or other people that are in our lives now in these wonderful new working situations. And so just want to acknowledge that and welcome everybody today. Thank you for setting aside this time. I am going to just give a brief introduction to our facilitator today. Her name is Janine Tandy. Janine Tandy is passionate and dedicated teacher in the practices of Yin Yoga and self-inquiry Yang Vinyasa Yoga. Janine has been teaching for 14 years, and she's also a licensed health coach from the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, specializing in, sorry, I lost the screen here. I apologize. Specializing in digestive wellness, and she holds a Master of Public Health degree from New York University. Her philosophy on curating a balanced, healthy life integrates this experience, coupled with her unique approach to her students' individuality. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Janine. Thank you for joining us today. And please, any questions, drop them in the chat for me. I'll keep an eye on that.
Thank you, Gretchen, for that introduction, and wonderful to be with you all today. It's a real pleasure for me to be here and to share this kind of content that is very meaningful and also incredibly timely. To work with the content around mindfulness and how mindfulness is a wonderful tool to work with stress, to help us manage stress in our lives, has been, I think many of us seen this last year, even more potent, that we give this content kind of attention. So I did want to start by just taking a couple of minutes here for all of us to sort of land or arrive here in this meeting together. Because even though physically we might be here and we're looking at the screen, it could be that the mind still feels like it's been pulled in many different directions, right? We're attending to what it was that was going on before we came into this space together, or potentially, other meetings and things that we need to get to when this is over. So it can be helpful to give ourselves just a little bit of time in which we can just start to gather the attention. And then that allows us to feel more gathered and more able to take in the content that I'll be sharing with you shortly. So we're just going to take 3 minutes. It's not a long practice here together, but it's a nice way to begin time. And I've got my little timer here, so that's what I'll be using to make sure that we don't run over in this. But I'd like to invite you first to just come into a comfortable seat, however that needs to look for you. So if you're on a chair, it could be if you're at home, maybe you're on a couch, or sometimes even on the floor, whatever tends to be comfortable for you. And the main thing about taking the seat, we want to think about coming into one that feels both relaxed and alert. So relaxed in terms of the body feels supported, whether we need to lean up against a wall or a chair to sort of assist in that process. For the sit bones to feel like they have somewhere to land that's comfortable. And to have an alert spine so that we just feel like the energy can be a little bit more up, so to speak. And then once you've adjusted into that comfortable seat, then take a couple of moments to decide if either closing the eyes feels inviting and comfortable. If that is something that's new, uncomfortable, then what I offer is just lowering the gaze a little bit in front of you. And what that does is it removes some of the potential for distraction. When our eyes start to wander around the room, our thoughts are going to follow, and it's going to take us away from here. So it just gives this opportunity to, again, gather ourselves and to just take some time here as an invitation to presence. So whether the eyes are closed or downward cast, just gently start to bring your awareness to where the body is connecting downward, or what we like to call the points of contact. So just allowing the mind's eye to sort of draw into those areas in which you feel the support of a chair, a couch, the ground, a cushion, whatever it is that is underneath. And just feeling the body as it is. And it might be in noticing how the body is in your seat. Other qualities might come into our awareness. So potentially any sensations that we're feeling, maybe there's a little bit of achiness or a part of the body that we're just noticing a little bit more. Or we could even notice a quality like tired or awake. So we're just allowing ourselves to sort of gather this information, which brings us into the present moment. We'll just take a few more breaths here doing that. Just feeling the body here and as it's connecting into the space that you're in. And just one more breath here. So breath being a full inhale and then a following exhalation. And after that, you can just gently lift the gaze or open the eyes if the eyes were closed, and just take a couple of moments to sort of see how this very brief practice felt. You know, if potentially there's this sensation of being more gathered and more here, or it could be interesting to notice if sometimes that takes a little bit of time, because it can, depending on what was happening before we made our way into this space together. So I will just hit my share screen now so I can open up the presentation. Back to the beginning here. There we are. Okay, so today's the content that we're going to be sharing is on mindfulness and being able to meet stress in a healthier way via this vehicle. And the first slide that I wanted to open with is one that I think is a really beautiful descriptor on what mindfulness is. And it's said by Jon Kabat-Zinn. And if you are less familiar with him, I'll give you a little bit of background. He's a very well-known teacher, longtime meditation practitioner. He's a professor emeritus of University of Massachusetts Medical Center. And he is the founder of MBSR, which is mindfulness-based stress reduction, and very steeped in these practices. And he has a lovely way of describing, well, what is mindfulness? And it's paying attention in a particular way on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. So that's quite a mouthful, and I'll say it again and then sort of unpack each part, because there's actually quite a lot in this description. So it's paying attention in a particular way on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. So we start with paying attention in a particular way. So essentially what this means is with mindfulness, it's sometimes perceived as being a passive, it has a passive quality, let's say, but it actually involves a very strong sort of actionable component, and that is our attention, right? We have to drive our attention in a particular way. So that's what he's meaning in this sort of first component of this description, is paying attention specifically, having some specificity of placement. And then the second bit is on purpose. And that means it has motivation, right? This attention has what we call intentionality. There is a strong purpose for why we're going to engage our attention in this specific way. And then the third piece of it is in the present moment. And I like this a lot because there's sort of a lot to be said here. And that is because our mind, when we're less conscious of where it is, so to speak, there tends to be sort of two directions in which it's drawn. The first being in the past, or what we call sometimes ruminating. So our mind can get stuck into things that were going on before, whether it's an event, sometimes we are thinking about something that happened in the past, whether it's a conversation, an interaction with someone, it could be anything, but it's a direction in which the mind is that is in past. The other way the mind can go is in the future, and sometimes that's known as futurizing. So essentially what that means is we're taken away from the present because we're thinking about something or worrying about something that could happen. So we're not there yet, but we're thinking about it. We're worrying, we're anxious about the future, or it becomes a process of trying to move away or move through quickly of what is our present moment. So many of us might be feeling this right now is that, it's been a very difficult year. The difficulty is not over. And many of us want to quickly race from outside of the place that we're in and get to post-COVID, right? That would be futurizing. So again, paying attention, directing our attention in a particular way with intentionality, a certain motivation in the present moment. So we're starting to move away from where the mind has tendency to go. And then taking all of that, we're looking to bring in a lens of being non-judgmental, right? Not critiquing or judging or trying to manipulate in any way the experience of what the present is, but it's a sort of open awareness of it. We could also say there's a very strong element of kindness and compassion with that viewing, that viewpoint, right? We're not looking to judge our experience, we're just holding it, okay? So I hope that all makes sense, but we'll, of course, have time to unpack any of these a little bit more with time for questions at the end of this session together. So we're gonna drill down now into this just a little bit more because there's a lot we can really cover in what mindfulness is. And that, of course, was a beautiful description of some of the layers of what mindfulness is. So if we look at the first bullet point, it's a deliberate training of attention. And I think that this is a really important point to be made because mindfulness is a practice, it's a skill. And it's something that we need to put some effort into, right? In the same way that we would develop other skills in our lives. So whether we play a sport, we practice playing tennis or going out for a run to maybe get faster if we want to enter a marathon, or we train in other areas in our professional life. So it's the same sort of thing here, is that it's a deliberate training. We develop a skill set in this area of how to be present. Mindfulness wakes us up. And what that means is it takes us beyond conditioned mind, or what sometimes is known as ordinary mind. And what that means is it takes us out of a place of living with less consciousness. So ordinary mind is, going through our day, we're busy, we're distracted, we're doing a lot of things, but we're not really paying attention to where we are. We might be pulled in all these different directions, into habits, into certain behaviors, but we're not conscious of any of our movements. And meditation starts to awaken us to, what is it that I do? Where am I? Where does my mind go? So when we practice holding our attention into the present moment, it becomes really interesting because when we try to quiet down, what happens? The mind wants to go into different directions. That's natural. It's natural for all of us, whether we are a longtime practitioner or we're very new to mindfulness. It's the mind is often referred to as a sort of puppy, kind of running off into all different directions, quite dispersive in nature. And another definition of mindfulness is a returning back home. So the mindfulness happens when we realize the mind's left the room and noticing where it went. And then we can draw ourselves back to the present moment. So we start to notice, as it says in this nice bullet point here, is our biases, our habits, our tendencies. So, okay, if I'm looking to really concentrate on here, on being present, and I'm having difficulty, I'm getting distracted, well, where is my mind going? Is it stuck in the past? Am I getting stuck around a certain narrative or a story or an event, a person? Is my tendency to worry a lot? Am I noticing a certain behavioral pattern in my life? So that's what this wakes us up to. We start to notice what's here. The next point here is mindfulness is not about trying to get somewhere. And this is a really interesting point because so much of the way in which we're taught from a young age, and also how we have to be in other points of our lives, are oriented around hitting targets, right? Or a goalpost, so to speak, trying to hit, let's say, another level of accomplishment. And with meditation, it's not that. We're actually looking to come back home to here. We're just trying to rest in a place of presence. So it allows us to disentangle a little bit from elements of striving, of gripping, and trying really hard to get somewhere. And we can relax a bit from that and just be here. So it trains us and allows us to experience that. It's also a way of being in the world, which I'll unpack a little bit more in the next slide. Because essentially what that means is it's not compartmentalized to a specific time of practice that we do in our chair, in our seat, but it becomes a way of how it is that we are in the world. Mindfulness also is a secular practice. I think for a long time, it was very much associated with Buddhism, other Eastern traditions, and it certainly has its origins there. But these practices of focusing on elements that draw us into presence are not based on any religions. It is a practice that we do of attention. So I think that's important to be said. And the lovely thing about mindfulness is there are so many different doorways in. There are so many different practices that we can engage in. And there's not one way to do it. Right? And there's also not one way to do it all the time, because sometimes it depends on how we're feeling. If we're really tired one day, one method might not be as applicable. We might want to try something else. Or sometimes, depending on what we're going through in our life, there's a different method that's going to make more sense. So it's wonderful in that it's incredibly flexible and adaptable. And there's so many different ways that we can approach mindfulness. So a way of being in the world. Mindfulness is having a sense of beginner's mind. And I'll sort of paraphrase a quote that it's actually a Zen Buddhist quote, but I think it really describes very well what beginner's mind is. The quote goes like this: in beginner's mind, the possibilities are many. In the expert's mind, possibilities are few. Right? And if we're able to come into each moment and just be with the moment as it is without expectations, we have an opportunity to see things differently, right? To think outside the box, to see a bigger picture. If we come in with an agenda, right, or with an expectation, then our view becomes very narrow and our experience becomes very narrow. So mindfulness allows us to just see and be with things differently, right? As a child sort of starts to view the world, right? There's no preconceptions. It's just all is open. And that's an amazing way to go through life professionally, personally, and interpersonally. Next is placing attention in the task at hand. So mindfulness allows us to be more clear and more focused then in what we are doing. We become less distracted, by things that are going on around us. In this picture, so showing a person going for a walk with a dog. So if that was us and, we're really practicing mindfulness on a regular basis, we start to go for a walk and we're less apt to kind of grab our phone out to do something else. We notice the trees differently around, the quality of the air, the sun. We just feel more present, right? We're less distracted, less dispersed in terms of our mindset. Mindfulness also cultivates a sense of ease that isn't tied to external conditions. So this one's big. And what this means is that mindfulness allows us to come into a place that feels content, and relates to sort of the slide that I just put up briefly in the beginning of this presentation, which shows a boat, in the water. So you can think of mindfulness as this anchor, and we're the boat, right? And when the boat is anchored, it moves with the waves, right? There's a sense of flexibility, but we're tethered, we're grounded, so that we're able to sort of feel adaptive and flexible to our surroundings, and we feel at peace, regardless of what's going on around us. And knowing that that sense of stability and ground is something that gets cultivated within. It's coming from inside of us, not related to an external circumstance. So, for instance, many of us might have experienced the feelings of being, let's say, adrift this past year. So if we placed our sense of contentment or happiness on having a certain routine, driving to work, being in an office and relating to people in that way, being able to go out as we please and socialize with our friends, being able to go outside and do things, in the way that we did pre-pandemic, or being able to, let's say, go out to a store and buy something, and maybe we didn't have the ability to do that for a long time because of lockdown, depending on where we live. If our happiness is attached onto being able to do certain things, see people, have a routine, and that all shifts, and all of a sudden we're thrown off, it causes a lot of internal disruptions and storms. So mindfulness works with us. It gives us a sense of using these internal resources, which we're going to tap into soon, knowing that we have an opportunity at any point to take a pause and be in open awareness. That creates this incredible opportunity to find a sense of ease regardless of our circumstances. So I hope that all makes sense, but we can go into that a bit more if needed at the end of the presentation. Another aspect of mindfulness is that the mind has a soft place to land. So when we're very busy and we're needing to think a lot, to be creative, to do a lot of things in the day, and mindfulness isn't at all saying that thinking is bad, we need to think, but it's when we're constantly in a mode that is multitasking and busy, and we don't have an opportunity to sort of step back and have a softening quality, we're going to feel a little bit of agitation. So this gives us an opportunity to rest the mind in the same way we sleep at night, we rest our body, or we give our body a break when we've done a lot of high intensity exercise. The mind also needs its time to sort of disengage a little bit from a higher intensity thought process. So the mind is a muscle in that way. We need to think about it like that. Mindfulness is also non-resisting. And what that means is when we're looking to feel more present, to come into this moment and to relate to it in a real way, that means we're including all of what that moment is. So if this moment right now is tired, we're feeling tired, or the mind is feeling a little bit foggy, then that's okay. This is what's here. We acknowledge that. If we're feeling really spacious and open and energetic, we acknowledge that. So it's this lovely opportunity to include everything, not resist, but to allow all of what our experience is to be present. And then lastly, it's a skill. It's something that we need to practice often, little and often. And the more we do it, and the more we understand the different ways of being able to connect to the present moment, it's easier to tap into that place of being more at ease. So now we'll take a little bit of time talking about the benefits. And I wanted to sort of front load this presentation with this, and then we'll go into talking a little bit about stress, but to understand, why this is so impactful, why this big umbrella of mindfulness matters. And these first couple of bullet points have to do more with the personal benefits of a mindfulness practice. So the first one is the reduction of stress. The more we're able to sit with our reality, to have some time to pause from what we're doing in a busy day, to pause from reactivity, it makes us feel differently. You know, we're more able to manage our stress response. We can make quick adjustments when we find ourselves feeling triggered by something or someone. It also helps if we have any issues of anxiety or depression as well. From an emotional perspective, it helps us regulate our emotions. So meaning we all feel emotions, all of us as human beings. This is what we do. And that is normal. We can feel a wide range of emotions during the course of a day, let alone a week. And that's, again, all good. But where mindfulness comes in is it allows us to notice when feelings are there, but without getting completely pulled into a storyline or be completely directed by an emotion, meaning it's something that we feel, but it doesn't direct our experience as a whole. Right? So we regulate more. It also allows us to have more of a capacity to feel connected, to feel love, joy, compassion, all of these things, because of, I think, a really important aspect, and that's inclusivity. When we practice mindfulness and that element that I mentioned on the previous slide, that we hold the present moment in all that it is for us, whether it's, you know, difficulty and challenges, or whether it's some joyous things that are going on in our life. There's a wonderful quote about what it is by Sharon Salzberg. And, you know, basically being at ease is being able to hold in one hand our joy and in the other hand our difficulties, right? That's a balanced life, is being able to hold both with a sense of reverence, inclusivity, but without feeling like we're adrift, you know, untethered, so to speak. So we really can then appreciate the good things in life. We have a different understanding of it, a different connection. So with the cognitive benefits, let's start first with improved focus and attention. So the more we can take these pauses and give our mind, you know, an opportunity to rest from multitasking and in dispersion, it gives us more of a sense of clarity. You know, when we are engaged in a task, there's a different kind of focus we have in it because of how we've trained the mind. We're better, it's been studied that people become better at problem solving, more creative, which I'll go into in a little bit, less ruminating, right? So we're less stuck in things that have happened in the past. And also it's been shown to protect against early onset dementia. So there's a lot of really important sort of physical aspects of how it works with the health of the mind and different sort of aspects of mind. In terms of our physiological well-being, it really has a huge effect on the nervous system, endocrine, and immune. And I think it's important to be said that all of our internal systems are deeply interconnected. Like a domino effect, you know, one influences the other. So when we practice mindfulness, it settles the nervous system. We feel more calm. When the nervous system is put at ease, we're not in a stress response, we're in rest response, then it boosts our immune system, right? Our ability to ward off viruses, colds, and things like that is upped. As well as if we are to get sick, it reduces the number of days in which we are feeling unwell. So it has a huge connection with our immune response. Same with our endocrine system. It affects the different ways in which our hormones are sent out and used in different capacities. It also has a big impact on our cardiovascular system. So a lot of really important physiological responses, some of which we'll touch on a little bit more. Mindfulness is also really good for pain management. So if we have hurt ourselves, if we have, you know, we've pulled a muscle, we've had aches and pains from something that might be a little bit maybe acute or smaller to, you know, if there's pain from any chronic illness or any long-term disability, if we practice mindfulness, we're better able to meet that. It doesn't necessarily mean that we will rid ourselves completely from pain, but we're able to work with it in a way that, again, it's not directive of our entire experience. It's been shown as well in studies that those who have a regular dedicated mindfulness practice tends to be, less using of anything from sort of antidepressants to, anti-inflammatory medications, even from like, let's say a Tylenol. We're able to sort of, manage how we feel a bit. Now, if we start to look at the more sort of interpersonal and relational benefits of a regular practice, is we become less reactive. And when we're able to sit with everything that's going on and we can notice the tendencies of the mind, right? When I'm looking to quiet down, where does my mind go? Am I going towards a specific thought or a narrative? Am I noticing that this certain event triggers me and I start to get upset? Once we become aware of those things, that mindfulness, that pause, we're able to kind of sit back when we notice ourselves getting triggered or reactive, and we can take a pause and remove ourselves from that and reduce that reactivity. It also really helps in communication. Take in other people as well. Professional benefits, our productivity goes up when we have this just and more grounded. Also, in terms of being able to communicate in teams and in groups, we're better able in terms of collaboration to listen and to voice our own needs as well, or our own ideas. In terms of our social interactions, again, it really makes a difference in terms of how we relate to others, our listening, our feelings of even just being more connected. We're better able to make decisions because we're coming from a place of ground, of feeling a sense of stability in who we are and where we are. And then also when we have a regular practice, it sort of feeds into other different aspects of our lives. When we start to feel clearer, feel more present, less reactive, often there's this extension of just wanting to maybe think about the way we eat differently and start to eat healthier. Maybe add in a little bit more physical activity in our routine. If we were a smoker, maybe we think about lessening that. We sleep better when we're feeling more present and able to manage when there is difficulty in our lives. So a huge impact here. And then in terms of creativity, when we engage in regular mindfulness, it opens up divergent thinking. And what that means is it allows us to think outside the box more. We see things differently. We're also more open to critique. So if we're having new ideas and we want to express them, we're not taking things in a judgmental way. We're able to hear other people's opinions differently. It lands, without a specific tone. And we get more into a state of flow. So now let's talk a little bit more specifically about one or two different ways in which we can become more present. Or to create an anchor. And for today's presentation, we'll talk about mindfulness of the body and then mindfulness of the breath. So I wanted to start with the body because it also is the way in which we began together. Those few minutes of arrival of a seated practice that we did together was an element of mindfulness of the body. And what's wonderful about that is our bodies are always in the present moment, right? Our body can't be in the past and our body can't be in the future. It's always here. So when we understand that, it becomes a doorway into practice. If I draw my attention just down to how I am placed right now, how is my physical body placed in space? And noticing the sit bones, or noticing if, maybe my legs are down or I'm lying on the ground, just feeling the body is a wonderful way of starting to feel more gathered, to come into a place that is present or here. And also the body absorbs everything that's going on. So whatever emotions we're feeling, that can be felt in the body, right? So if we're feeling anxious, often we can identify that as maybe a tightening in the chest, or we're nervous, butterflies in the stomach, right? All of these feelings and tones have a physical manifestation. Joy and stress does. So when we notice the physical sensations that can arise in the body and direct our attention to it, That's an aspect of mindfulness. And we have a lot of opportunities to do this throughout the day. It allows us to get comfortable with whatever is in our physical body. And our physical body encompasses these 3 points here, our body, heart, mind. That is the body. Because I think sometimes, especially in the Western world, we can think about our bodies in a very compartmentalized way, because that's the way Western medicine views us. You know, you hurt your arm, you go to the person who's going to help your arm out. But we hardly think about the bigger picture, our whole body. And with mindfulness of the body, it is about how everything is connected. You know, the way in which we're feeling is going to impact the mind, right? The way in which the body is, and vice versa. You know, if the mind's very agitated, often the body's going to have a response of feeling more constricted and tight. So this is a lovely way for us to start to become aware of all of this. And if there is discomfort in the physical body, if there are aches and pains, or if there is illness, we can start to relate to that in a real way, rather than resisting it, pretending it's not there, or feeling sort of disassociated from it. So it really allows us to dive in. And embodied practices are a wonderful way in, especially if some of the other practices feel like, you know, they're harder to touch, so to speak. You know, if you tend to engage in physical activity and you are having a certain level of body awareness, this is a really wonderful doorway in. And it helps cultivate a sense of curiosity and what is known as interoception. So many of you have heard of proprioception, and that's just knowing where the body is in space. So that's something that we perhaps think about, because as we're walking around, you know, navigating our homes or outside, you know, we're very aware of not walking into something or walking into someone, right? We're very conscious of how we're moving our body. Or if we're engaging in any movement or exercise, we're, you know, thinking about how our body is moving in space. What mindfulness does is it allows us to think about our inner spaces, and that means sensations. So we become more in touch with, you know, feelings, let's say, such as hunger or thirst, or feelings like tiredness or being energized. So we start to be able to kind of relate to our inner atmosphere differently, which is part of the body. And then the second anchor, which is a lovely one to use as a doorway into mindfulness, is the breath, which is an aspect of body. And as Sharon Salzberg says, it's a lovely quote, it is our ultimate mobile device, right? Because wherever we go, just like the body, the breath is always with us. It's a companion. But it's one of those things we tend to not relate to a lot, right? We don't think about breathing unless maybe all of a sudden we go for a run and then we become a bit more conscious that the breathing is more labored or faster or something like that. Or maybe we become conscious if we go out in the cold and we can feel that uptick of breath, you know, when it's very, very cold out. But it gives us an interesting opportunity to relate. And the body breathes on its own. It's not something that we have to make ourselves do. But nicely, we can, of course, work with it. We can change the way we breathe, but we don't have to make ourselves breathe. It's autonomic. And there's many different aspects of the breath that we can tap into as a way to anchor. And there's a few listed here. So we've got the in-breath, right? Our inhale, we can pay attention to that. And that can help us feel present. We can pay attention to our exhalation, the out-breath. We can also pay attention to the spaces in between. So we naturally have these resting points at the top of our breath. There's almost this kind of pause that happens, and then at the bottom of the breath. So that can also be a point of focus when we're paying attention to the breath as an anchor. And the last bit that's important is that, you know, our breath is our connection to life itself. It's the first thing we do when we come into this world, and it's the last thing we do before we leave. And it connects us to what is precious in life. You know, we're able to be here, we're breathing. And if we can kind of relate to that, when we're going through something difficult, or we're feeling really tired, and we can tap into that preciousness of life force itself, that is very, very powerful. So what I'd like to do now that I've been talking for some time, and you probably have been sitting for some time, is to engage in another very short practice. in one that is now giving ourselves an anchor of the breath. So mindfulness of breath. And specifically, we're going to work on focusing on the quality, and I'll walk you through what that means. So as I get my timer ready, if you need to make any shifts in your seat right now, so if you're sat in a cross-legged position and you might want to change the legs or make any adjustments to cushions or things like that that are underneath, you're welcome to do that. So you just feel, again, relaxed and alert, and that the body has something safe to land into. Because when the body feels relaxed and held, so to speak, it's easier for the mind to land right into the present moment. So I'll just hit the timer now, and you're welcome as before to either close the eyes if that's something that is comfortable and safe. If that doesn't feel easy or comfortable, then just lower the gaze. So again, we're just allowing ourselves to relate more to our inner environment rather than our external environment. And as you start to draw the awareness inward, just notice the breath as it is. So not looking to change the pace or anything about it. We're just noticing the body breathe itself. And as you're noticing the body breathe, how does the breath feel to you right now? So it could be that you notice the temperature, and maybe if the mouth is closed, you might notice that the air moving in through the nose is cool, or maybe it's warm, depending on the environment you're in. So you might notice a temperature. You might notice a pace, if the breath feels lengthened, or maybe it's more sort of shallow or shorter. It could be that the breath feels really smooth and calm, or maybe it feels something different than that. Maybe you might notice some agitation. And for this last minute here, maybe you can notice parts of the body that you sense movement with each round of breath. So it could be that you notice a rise and fall of the belly or the chest, or even around the ribs. Just feeling the body breathe and the quality of the breath that is felt for you right now, without any direction or manipulation of it, just experiencing it as it is. And take just 3 more breaths. And after that third out breath, inviting you to just gently lift the gaze or open the eyes and just take a couple of breaths, kind of just seeing how that felt for you. And in that, inviting in that lens of non-judgment, right? And instead of compassion and curiosity, how was that experience for me? Maybe it was really interesting. Maybe it was difficult. Maybe it was somewhere in between. But just good to sort of pay attention. And so an interesting doorway into mindfulness. So now that we've had a little bit of time to understand, well, what is mindfulness? How is it beneficial? And what are the different ways in which we can come into a place of presence? We'll talk a little bit about more as to why this practice is so important in terms of helping us meet our stress with skill. So in order to do that, we need to just spend a brief bit of time talking about, well, what is stress? What are the different types of stress? Because there are two different types. And I think it's important to be said that all stress isn't bad, right? There are reasons why the body has this reaction. So the first form of stress would be acute. So that is something that is sudden, it's short-lived, and often it's event-placed. So for instance, you're running down the street, you see your bus that you need to catch for work, and it's starting to pull away. And you can kind of feel the stress response coming because you have a meeting you need to get to and you need to be on that bus, right? That's an acute bit of stress. And then, after that event, the body comes back into a place that is rest, right? There's a sort of kind of quick circle back in. The other type of stress is chronic, and that's something that is ongoing, right? Prolonged. And that can come from everyday pressures of life, of pandemic, for instance, like we're in. There can be this sort of, driving force of stress of all these changes and shifts we've had to make and have to keep making. It can be illness related. It could be environmental. So maybe the environment in which we're living, our house, our apartment, the fact that maybe we're working from home and we also have to manage family can be stressful. There can be prolonged stress from also just professional pressures. And then relational, so meaning our relationships that we have, either friendships or, relationships of marriage or partnership. And I put this slide in just to kind of, again, bring to the forefront of what's really been here for all of us this past year. There's been a lot of stress in how we have to navigate ourselves through space, right? Wearing masks, distancing from people, avoiding people, maybe having to self-isolate depending on who we've come into contact with, not being able to go places. So many things have changed that have put a lot of pressure on us. And these statistics, we can probably update them a little bit, but they are not that old. Showing the effects of our mental well-being during this past year, because there's been a huge impact. And that a poll of nearly half adults, and it's a little bit higher now, have reported that their mental health has been negatively impacted, this past year, worrying about the virus, someone we love having it, or, perhaps horribly passing from it. There's been a lot more reports of anxiety, depression, whether they've been brief or more prolonged. And then, of course, greater social isolation has a huge impact on us. By nature, for the most part, we humans are social creatures, and to not be able to do that puts stress on us. And then we add in having to homeschool, work from home. Maybe we've been going back and forth between the two, and that can be difficult. So there's a lot going on. So what does that do in the body? We'll just show these next few slides a little bit more quickly, but it's just to highlight a couple of things. So our nervous system has sort of two branches. Our autonomic nervous system has the parasympathetic and our sympathetic nervous system. So the parasympathetic, which is on the left of the slide, is what we call our rest and digest mode. So the opposite of a stress response. And so what happens in the body when we are in this place of being is that our alpha waves increase, which are sort of the waves, the brain waves that are when we are in rest. And our mental focus increases, so that opportunity to be clear and focused and able to do the tasks at hand goes up, cognition goes up. Our limbic system, the activity of it goes down. Our limbic system is what is sometimes known as our reptilian brain. And that's the part of the brain that kicks into gear with that stress response, the fight or flight. And it's also what houses important circadian rhythms in the body. So our sleep cycle, our mood, our appetite, also our libido. So that's intrinsically connected to the body's fight or flight response. Our heart rate goes down, our respiratory rate, our blood pressure, all of that is nice and low and in a resting place when we are at rest, so to speak. Our digestion is natural. There's a lot more energy gone into our digestive processes. In a sympathetic state, it's the opposite of that. So our digestion becomes, it basically slows down, sometimes stops, because the blood, the energy needs to go to other parts of the body. So our heart rate goes up, our respiratory rate, our blood pressure goes up because we might need to kick into gear to do something. So maybe that's physically having a response, a fight, a flight, or it could be that, you know, we're just agitating the system because we need to wake up and think about what we need to do. Our ability to focus goes down. Our ability to retain information goes down. So all this impacts the energy of the limbic system goes up. So that fight or flight response. I wanted to show you that just so we can understand a little bit of the physiology of stress in the physical body. And this I'll just kind of go through a bit quickly. On the left is, again, a little bit more about our fight or flight, this reactivity response, and what happens when we are in that mode. So the sleep disruptions, arrhythmias, we can have a lot of headaches. The body is in this place of overreacting. We can go towards trying to soothe ourselves in ways that are less healthy, let's say. But when we look on the right side of the slide, when we can add in mindfulness, what that does is that pause interrupts these responses that are going on the left. So if we see a trigger or we're feeling ourselves getting a little bit agitated, and we know we have these skills we're developing in being and sitting with difficulty or sitting with events that are hard, we're able to find different ways of managing it, and we're quicker to recover from it. And we start to live more from the front of the brain, which is shown in this slide. The front of the brain is called our prefrontal cortex. And that is the part of the brain in which our empathy is sort of housed, so to speak, where we have insight, understandings, flexibility, where we are more emotionally regulated. Our body is also regulated. We have conscious communication. Our fear is regulated. So when we are engaged in regular mindfulness practices, we're living from this place more, okay, this place of ground, rather than from the limbic brain. And so what this does is it allows us to focus our attention, manage our impulses, our reactions. We're able to plan and think more clearly, which is really important. And this word up here, neuroplasticity, I'll just touch on a bit because this is really important. For a long time, it was thought that, you know, we have our brains, we have a way in which we behave and live, and that's it. Nothing's changeable. And that's far from the truth. You know, the brain is incredibly malleable. So what neuroplasticity is that when we meditate and we start to shift and notice behaviors and make these changes, we're creating new neural pathways in the brain. So whatever we thought was fixed, whether it was an identity that we had of ourselves, a behavior, all of a sudden that groove that might have felt like it was quite deep gets filled in. And then there's another one that's built over here. So we actually change the wiring of the brain. So we develop this mental musculature. And we're able to engage and be in this world in a way that is fluid, that is softer. Okay. So I wanted to finish with this slide here, which is where do I start? Because this could feel like it's a lot of information and it's also a big invitation. And so, you know, hearing this, we can get quite encouraged about wanting to dive into practices like this. And there's a couple of pointers that I'll draw on, you know, that can keep you, give you some focus on how to go forward here. So is to understand your motivation, your intention. You know, why is it that you want to practice mindfulness, to develop these skills? Because the more we're able to have our motivation, our inspiration here, kind of hold it close, we're better able to align to that. We're better able to keep to a practice, right? If we know we just want to move more fluidly through our life, we want to feel more at ease, not reactive, not out of control, right? But to feel here and grounded. So it's understanding that. And then starting off, I would call it with more sort of baby steps. Commit to a certain period of time to begin, like look at a month's block. And it's a less is more approach. So rather than diving in and trying to sit for 30 minutes, start with 3 minutes, just like we did today. in those two short practices we have, just 3 minutes a day. And maybe it eventually grows to trying that a few times a day. And also commit to doing it at a time of day where you feel like you have a better opportunity of sticking with it. So if you're a morning person and you tend to get up maybe before the rest of the house, or if you live alone and you like to have that time, maybe with a cup of coffee, take those 3 minutes and start your day in that way, knowing that this is a good time. Maybe it's right before bed, maybe it's on a lunch break, but it's finding that time that is going to work with sort of your personality and the way in which you move through your day most frequently. Connect with a practice that's better suited to you. So if anchoring in the body really resonates, start with that. If connecting to the breath feels like it's something that you could relate to, start with that, and so on. Seeking out resources like teachers. There's so many books out there that are fantastic, written by a lot of people who are very steeped in their practices and offer very practical ways of beginning. There are wonderful apps and online practices. I know there's someone who's talking about being on Headspace. A lot of great resources. And of course, Studio B has an incredible, huge library of resources of teachers and practices. And then not discounting embodied practices as mindfulness. So taking a walk and not looking at our phone, journaling, doing these things are mindfulness. Sitting with a cup of tea or a coffee and not doing anything else, just being in that moment, is a form of mindfulness. And then perhaps, buddying up with someone or having someone else to do it with, so that you can sort of share back and forth or know that you're not in that alone. So these are really great ways to begin a practice. So I'll just stop sharing the screen. Gretchen, if you're there, I don't know if there are any questions or anything that came up, or if anyone wanted to share any thoughts as we have just a few minutes left of this hour together. I'm here for that. So.
I don't see any questions in the chat, but certainly if anybody has any questions or anything we can help out with, you could drop it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask a question directly.
I don't know, that might have been a lot of it. It is a lot of information to land. So sometimes it takes a little bit of time to digest, but I know there'll be a follow-up from Gretchen as well.
Yes, we'll be sending out an email via Juliet with the recording of today's session. So if there's something that you wanted to revisit, or if there's a coworker here that was not here that would like to view it, we'll have a recorded version out to you by the end of this week.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be here with you and to share this. Again, it's been something that's been incredibly impactful in my life. And it's something that I feel incredibly passionate about sharing, because it's so transformational in terms of, how we just feel differently in our body and differently in this world. Thank you. Wonderful to get these messages. I really appreciate so many of you taking time to be here as well. I know that can be hard, with a busy day, so it's very much appreciated. So if they're enjoyed the getting started ideas. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, they're good, because I think it's it's easy to get overwhelmed with a lot of information, and it's good to sort of have a couple of bullet points to just think about what are some easy ways to just begin a little bit here, and always start with that less is more approach. It's more sustainable.
Right.
Yes. The ruminating mind. My pleasure. Thank you. Yes, I do have some recommendations. I mean, outside of Studio B, I can give you some personal recommendations as well. There's a lot of wonderful authors like Jon Kabat-Zinn. He has many books. The one who I did the quote from in the beginning of practice. He has incredible books on introduction to mindfulness practices. Joseph Goldstein, Jack Kornfield. I've been a student of his. He's brilliant. He's one of the founders of Spirit Rock and the Insight practices. He has weekly Dharma talks, lots of books, lots of podcasts. So Jack Kornfield and his partner, Trudy Goodman, as well. Tara Broch. She has also regular shares of practices and day retreats, books, many books, fantastic books. So yeah, a lot of wonderful places to start and read and you know, to feel connected to this.
I'll include some of those resources on the follow-up email.
Okay. Okay.
Well, wonderful. We're at our 1 o'clock mark. So again, thank you for everybody for attending today. And if you have any questions, we'll be sending out an email, and feel free to reach out to me directly, and I can help you if you're looking for a specific practice that could be found on the Studio B platform.
Well, again, thank you so much for all your time. It's been wonderful to be with you all. And yeah. Take care. Hope the rest of your day travels well. And I will talk with you soon, Gretchen.
Thank you so much, Janine.
My pleasure. My pleasure.